Want to become an AI trailblazer in the product world? Pragmatic Institute's newest workshop, AI for Product Professionals, is your ticket to generative AI mastery. In this hands-on training, learn to master ChatGPT and prompt engineering to transform your product strategies, rapidly create content, optimize workflows, and make razor-sharp product decisions fueled by data. Don't just keep up with the AI revolution, lead it. Seats are limited. Enroll today at pragmaticinstitute.com/AI workshop.
Hello, and welcome to the Pragmatic Product Chat series, where we tackle the biggest challenges facing today's product management, product marketing, and other market and data-driven professionals with some of the best minds in the industry. I am Rebecca Kalogeris of Pragmatic Institute and your host for this episode. Today, I am extremely excited to have on Will Scott, who is one of the most impressive minds in B2B product marketing and management, our newest Pragmatic instructor, and someone that I always learn from whenever we have a conversation. So I'm extremely excited to have you on the show. Will, welcome.
Thanks very much, Rebecca. I'm thrilled to be here.
And today we're going to talk about something that is currently everywhere, right? It's everywhere in the news. It's every story that you read. It's something I think we're all playing with and thinking about a lot, which is AI, and specifically AI as it relates to our roles in product management and product marketing.
That's right. Looking forward to it.
Yeah. But before we jump into that, Will, why don't you give everybody sort of your origin story, right? What is it that made you so passionate about product and product marketing and really drove you to what you do today?
Well, I think like most people, I never set out to become a product manager and a product marketeer. Many product managers and product marketeers I talked to ended up in that role as a result of finding something really interesting. Of all things, I studied in university naval architecture. So it's a very engineering heavy degree. But my first job, I was living and working actually in Central Europe, was in a role of business development and product marketing. And I found myself getting a real passion about it because I think, utilizing my engineering skills, I like to really decompose and understand difficult problems. And then from there, construct solutions. And then going forward, as it relates to marketing, how do we articulate the brilliance and the fantasticness of all that we've done in a manner that the people who are perhaps not as familiar with what we do can understand and can resonate. So throughout my career, I sort of got more and more involved in product marketing and product management, mainly towards the end of my career as in the marketing side of things, the CMO, but I still have a sort of deep love from my original role in product management. Anyway, and then I, as most recently, joined Pragmatic Marketing, which is Pragmatic Institute, which has been something I've been talking on and off to Pragmatic for a number of years, but now I decided it was the right time in my career to become an educator and see what I can do to help my fellow product managers and product marketeers.
Excellent. And I think that's one of the exciting things about being at Pragmatic, right? Is we are very, very passionate about products and in the roles we've had before, and then to come and be able to share that passion and to find others who are entering that space and who also share that passion and to be able to kind of like help them grow as we also learn and expand, I think is one of the best parts about being here.
Absolutely. And I think, one thing that struck me is that when you talk to product managers or product marketeers, no matter what kind of product they're managing or marketing, when you take away the nouns, the verbs stay the same. They're all trying to do the same thing, whether it's a physical hardware product, it's a software product, it's a service. We're all trying to do the same thing, which is deeply and intimately understand the problems of the marketplace and build fantastic solutions to that, regardless of what kind of product you have. So I think under the surface of the product itself, we've all got very similar DNA, I think.
Absolutely. So recently, I've been thinking a lot back about my time, both, my decades in products, we're getting to that point where there's a plural at the end, and my 11 years here at Pragmatic. And I think about just how much product management and product marketing has changed, right? Many, many ways. Again, not only is the problems that we're trying to solve the same across industries, but the problems that we're trying to solve are the same that they've always been.
Right.
But there's still been some really big shifts, right? When we think of agile and we think about the rise of SaaS solutions, right? Those things and that sort of continually really, really changed the industry. That there isn't always like a point in time when you're like, it happened that day, right? it always feels a little bit like it happened kind of slowly over time. What I find interesting about AI, and I know it's been around a long time, and everyone's gonna be like, it didn't, the world didn't change with the release in November, but it kind of did because it became so much more accessible to so many different people. And so when I think about big changes in products, it's hard not to think of AI and generative AI in particular, which gives us the access to it, really being one of those things that we're still going to be solving the same problems. We're still have the same needs, but the way we do it maybe has shifted quite notably and maybe forever.
Absolutely, I agree. And I think those shifts that you and I have both seen over our careers, right? Although it is a bit like that frog in a hot plate scenario, we didn't really notice them coming. Even if I compare, because we were both around for the internet revolution, that took several years for it to take, several years before people really grasped about what it was all about and how it could change their business. What has struck me about generative AI is it being from unknown to everyone talking about it within a matter of 6 months. I mean, this time last year, no one was talking about generative AI. And now you can't move on any kind of product marketing or product management or frankly, any kind of business website without reading about it. So what struck me is the speed at which it became like the latest topic.
The internet one's a good comparison, right? Because I think there was a big belief that it wasn't like, maybe it was just a fad and it was going to stick around, which sounds so ridiculous to say out loud. And I think with AI, we all know it may shift and change and it will continue to evolve, but it's not going anywhere. You cannot put this genie back in the bottle.
No, you can't. But I'm sure just like most technologies, it's going to follow some version of, the Gartner hype cycle, right? Where we reach the peak of inflated expectations and then the trough of disillusionment. And I can't remember the last plateau of productivity, I think was the last one. Right?
Oh, absolutely. And you can even see some of that's already occurring where people are like, well, it's not a miracle cure, right? And that's totally true.
Yeah.
But it is important. I think that's why we want to talk about it today, right? It's important. It's going to evolve, but it's not going to go away. So how do we as product management and product marketing people really leverage it effectively and understand its opportunity?
Yeah.
So let's talk about that. Let's talk a little bit about, I know you've been thinking a ton about this. You've been working on our course about this.
Yep.
This is an area that you're very passionate about. Tell me a little bit about when you think about the use cases, right? Those that you've seen either people do and can share about, or that you just think, man, there is so much opportunity for this kind of use case.
Well, I think if I first of all, think about how when I've talked to product managers and product marketeers, obviously we're still in a very nascent position. A lot of people are just experimenting mode right now, which is absolutely fine. I think that's the right thing. They're trying to get to grips with it, seeing where it can help them, seeing where its strengths are, seeing where its weaknesses are. And I think the biggest use case at sort of a meta level is generative AI tools, particularly large language models, can act as a collaborative partner. And I think that's the most important thing. I've been using it a ton myself, spending a lot of time experimenting with it, refining my prompts, getting different answers out there, asking it to give it in, different structures and different formats and things like that. So as a collaborative partner, I think this is an absolutely remarkable technology. And so that's where I think of the use case. So when you can apply that to things like positioning, things like persona development, things like problem identification, things like coming up with different ideas for different marketing language, all those sort of things can benefit from having this super collaborative partner that's very articulate and, generates great rhetoric that we can utilize.
I love the way that you use the term collaborative partner, because I think it's what people say when they're like, oh, it's a good first draft or it's a good first thing. But your point is, it is not, the answer isn't there, but there is so much help and there's so much assistance. There's different perspectives that when you use it as a tool and you collaborate with it, the combined answer that you guys get, not just but the combined one is where you really see the power.
Absolutely. And I remember many years ago, a CTO that I worked with came out with a case, gave me a phrase which I've never forgotten, which is, it's always easier to criticize rather than synthesize. And I remember back in my consulting days, I'd oftentimes go and do all my interviews around in a organization. And then I give a presentation and preface it with, this is almost certainly wrong. But what I want you to tell me is where it's wrong. And it's just so much faster to get to an effective result than just staring at a blank whiteboard and trying to come up with the answer. So that's what I think is very powerful of, is it gives you that first draft to then you can criticize and iterate on.
I love that. I think a lot of this is wrong. Show me where it's wrong. It also just makes it very collaborative, right? You
Yeah.
immediately put people in the different spot. So I'm going to steal that. So you talked about you just named 3 or 4 different areas in particular where AI might be a good collaborative partner. Can we talk a little bit more in detail about some of those?
Yeah, absolutely. So there was one actually in preparing for this course, I was experimenting with some different prompt types. And we spent a lot of time in the new course talking about the wide variety of different prompt types. And one of them is where you can ask, in this case, we're using ChatGPT, but you could equally use Claude and things like that, to assume a persona. You are the CFO of a mid-market manufacturing company, and you lay out some kind of scenario for the CFO, and then you can start asking it questions, almost as if it was a real person. Now, obviously, it's not a real person, but it's a great way of starting to get insight into some of the, problems that the market face by asking questions you'd love to be able to ask a real CFO, right? But I think where you have to be cautious is recognize that we can't just take these answers as certain truth, right? It allows us to generate our hypotheses, which we will then go and test further out in the marketplace rather than just outsourcing all our thinking. So that was a great example, is I was asking it to pretend to be a CFO and ask it any question I like in a very safe environment without worrying, you're going to sound stupid because ChatGPT doesn't judge you, at least not yet. Anyway.
Right. I mean, I think that's really interesting for personas maybe where you're less familiar with, right? Or where you're just going to start to get some hypothesis to test kind of. Because to your point, you want to be careful that we're not in a closed circuit, right? Where we're just asking it and getting the same answers and it's sort of creating a false narrative, right? It's not human-centered if we're only talking to the AI. But I also think another interesting part about that, when we talk about using it for some of those things, is in that scenario, your competitor could be asking the exact same question and the exact same thing, right? So how do you think about that when you think about AI and sort of lowering competitive barriers, or just how do we continue to get differentiation if, that tool and those answers are going to be the same for everybody?
Right. It's a bit worrying, right? If every single product manager out there who's in the business of building, accounting software, SMEs, ask the same questions, there's a risk we're all going to end up with the same product, right? I don't think that's really going to happen, but this is where I think that the power of the human working with the machine comes together. As individuals, right? I think about going out and things that AI can't do right now. When we go out and do, our discovery interviews, right? The sort of situational fluency you have to have there, the sort of intuition you have to have where, Rebecca, I hear you hesitate or pause or struggle for words and things like that. That's something that today AI can't do, right? And I, as a human, because I do have that intuition, can press on further and push down these various threads. So I think it's still, having AI doesn't eliminate by any means the critically important role of being a product manager or a product marketeer. It still requires a level of intuition and experience, right? We're not going to outsource all our thinking to large language models.
I totally agree with that. And I would also add from something that you've taught me previously, right, too, that how we do the prompts, the type of context that we provide is another way where we differentiate, right? If we bring a deeper knowledge and understanding of our personas to the conversation and share it with that, the answers I get back are different, right? So both I can use my intelligence or my market intelligence both during the process and after the process to make sure that it's both accurate and that it's differentiated. And I think that's a really, really important. There's a difference between, tell me what a CFO would think and tell me what a CFO who, works with this kind of company where maybe they're looking to get purchased and that all that extra pieces of context and understanding are going to provide the AI with a better understanding to respond.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, right now, ChatGPT can remember the last 8,000 tokens, approximate that to words. Fortunately, I can remember the last 30 years of my career. Well, I'm not sure I can remember it entirely, but, approximately, right? And those synaptic connections that I've made are unknown to me consciously, but are still, when I go out and we do these market discovery interviews, we're making connections we don't even know why we're making them. And this is where intuition and imagination come into play as well. And I think one of the things you have to caution ourselves is, sort of anthropomorphizing ChatGPT. They're not people. They're not, artificial intelligence is actually a misnomer. One of the things we talk about in the course is how it actually works, what it's actually doing. And that, when I learned it, just brought a lot of clarity. Say, okay, I understand now. And now I understand how it does what it does. I can understand where the limitations, where the cautions, value add opportunities for me are. that you might not necessarily know, because I'm sure you played it, Rebecca. It feels like a person, right? We talk about what does ChatGPT say? Like it's a person. And it's not. It's a very sophisticated piece of computer code, but it's not a person.
It's funny though, because I was talking to someone and they're like, well, I asked ChatGPT its opinion. And I thought, what? It doesn't have it. But you start to forget that, right? I don't want its opinion, right? Like that's not going to help us. But both of us have been in wide product careers, but I think both of us have a soft spot for the product marketing side of the house, which is obviously where all the cool kids hang out. As I always tell our product management team internally, like, well, you guys are okay. And I do think we've seen, and I know we've heard a lot of stories and we've seen a lot of activities about product marketing and marketing communication, really leaning into AI as the means for creating messaging.
Yes,
right?
Absolutely.
Talk to me a little bit about the opportunities there and some of the concerns and threats.
Yeah, well, I think certainly as a collaborative tool, once more, the idea that it can get you that starting point, we can say, no, that's not quite right. I started playing around with, create me 15 different LinkedIn post intros to an article I just wrote on LinkedIn, right? And I had a look at them and I said, okay, well, change it this way, change it that way. So then now you're seeing people saying, well, what we can do is we can create 15 different pieces of copy for an advert that we're going to run LinkedIn. And we're going to run it for a week, and then we're going to pull the results. We're going to see the top 3 performing. We say, ChatGPT, these are the top 3 performing messages that you put out there. Now create me 15 variants of those. So almost like in a Darwinian way, we can start doing some selection and refinement, generation over generation over generation of fantastic marketing messaging. And so that's, one of the ways I see it. But just on the creative side, when you ask it to, it's that classic sort of rewrite that in the style of William Shakespeare or rewrite that as a haiku. It can generate ideas that you didn't know you had. And the speed at which it can give those returns, I think is very powerful.
Yes. I think that one area that this is where you always see the bad articles, right, is there's an accuracy piece, right? Which isn't true when you're doing a headline and those kind of things. But I think we see more and more people trying to do content, since content is such a big part of product marketing. And they think that's okay. The AI can write it. And, there's a million examples of, well, that's not both where the accuracy is off or where you read it and you think no human being wrote that because hardly any human being can read it. Right. Yes. And I think there's a definite danger there. Doesn't mean there isn't an opportunity, but I think the idea that content can't be a differentiator anymore because AI can write content is probably missing what really strong differentiated content was about, right? There's always been bad blog posts winning at SEO battles, but they don't end up getting the company where it wants to be.
Because of the speed at which it can generate things, we can easily get seduced back into the idea that quantity rules over quality. I watch these short form videos, on this Facebook feed that says, hey, now you can outsource, the creation of 25 different AI generated talking AI videos, and you don't have to do anything. You just create a script and feed it all in. And I want to say, why?
Right.
Why create 25? Do you think that somehow quantity is going to be ruling over quality? The other thing as well is, let's remember, AI, whilst it can come up with new ways of stating things that have already happened, I think the really powerful content is going to be talking about the future, showing really thought leadership. And whilst it might be able to help you do that, that's where the differentiation is going to be. And I agree with you. Now you can read content and say, no one wrote that. No one says sentences like that.
Right.
Yeah.
Yep. Yes. Okay. But there's lots of opportunities. We've talked about some of the cautions. Is there any thing that you've done or something that you've talked to people that just kind of it may not have been perfect, but it's got that spark of excitement where you're like, holy crud, starts to show where we could be long-term. What's the idea?
Yeah, I think I go back to it now as that collaborative partner. When I have that moment of inspiration, when I have that moment at 7:00 in the evening after finished dinner, I said, I just had a really good idea. I want to explore that a little bit more. Now I don't have to wait to have a call with someone, right? I can basically tap into the entire internet and start exploring that idea there and then. So the speed at which we can innovate, not only because it's always on, but also because it's so quick at coming with these very informed responses is incredible. And that's I'm like, how are we going to make sense of that in product management and product marketing? I don't know the answer yet. I know it's going to change our jobs. And I'm sure there's lots of other people who are going to have an opinion on this. But the speed of innovation, both on the product management and product marketing side, is going to be accelerated. However, we would be remiss without just checking the cautions, right? We've talked about hallucinations and we've all read the stories. And I think one of the cautions, this is something we talk about in the course as well. One of the cautions is it's a very friendly system. It will give you an answer, whether it's right or wrong.
It will never say, I don't know.
So, and I remember because we're collaborating with another company on developing this, I remember saying, well, how do you know it's the wrong answer? And he's like, this is now where your intuition comes in. This is now saying, okay, that doesn't look right to me. And so we've got to be careful of that, right? And there's even these new things like what happens when AI starts feeding off its own content. Apparently the model breaks down. You've got this concept called drift, where over time it drifts off. So there's lots of things we've got to be cautious about. But, as someone said to me the other day, I think it was actually someone who went to an AI conference said, this is the worst version of AI you will ever use. You're using right now, right?
And that, I think, is the exciting part. Yes. Understand it is imperfect, but don't wait to learn about it and try it until it's perfect, right? I think you'd be really far behind. Yeah. And just to know that it's going to continue to get better. And every once in a while when something good comes out, you're like, oh man, like you said, this is the early version and the power it could have down the road is really exciting.
But it's also not a nice to have, Rebecca, as well. I think anyone going on a job interview tomorrow who says, I haven't really played with it, I don't know anything about it, is going to be on the back foot there. I think is expected now in all professions, but certainly in product management, product marketing, you're going to get the question, what's your view on AI? What's your thoughts of it? And that's where you've got to educate it. You can't hide from this. It's, as you said, you can't put that genie back in the bottle, right?
And it will be interesting because I do think most people are at that stage still of, I'm playing with it, right? I use it for some things. I don't necessarily have a full process or procedure about how or when. There are definitely some of our clients, though, that are working on building that kind of function into their product, which is a little bit further down. But it will be interesting when it goes from, what are your thoughts, play around, to how do you leverage it? Yeah. Where is the process and the place and what are the best places for it? I think is another area to just keep exploring.
Absolutely. And I think that's where you've got to sort of get a little bit more formal about your investigation of this new opportunity. It's one thing to dig your hands in and say, hey, I went to Europe this summer for my vacation and I stayed in southern Bavaria and I had AI suggest a whole bunch of places. That was fantastic, right? But I think it would be a remiss of many people just to think that playing around for personal reasons in AI as a curiosity will be sufficient to answer that question in the job interview, right? It has to be a little bit more structured.
Yep.
And a little bit more formal interrogation of what it can do and where it can help you.
Excellent. If you were going to, in that idea, right? If you were like, okay, so it's great to play with it. That's how you get your feet wet. And it's really great to play with it on, I think, sometimes personal items or things you really know, because it helps you see how it gives you an idea of, it's like 92% accurate or whatever. Something that you can really use your intuition on is great.
Yeah.
But then to your point, that's great. You've got that far now. Like, think about some areas of your role where you can test it and see, are there hints that you would give listeners about how to go about doing that? They're ready for that stage. Like, let me go a little step further.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think that's where it comes down. I mean, it's a phrase we've all heard, but when I was learning and preparing to teach this course, I got a lot of experience. I spent more hours than I care to remember playing with these AI models. And what I learned is how critical understanding the question you ask, known today as prompt engineering, is, and all the different ways you can structure. And I'm going way beyond, Rebecca, the prompts you can go and download from websites, right? It's how do you structure prompts in a way that you can get AI to help itself, what we call metacognition prompts, right? Understanding that and just seeing the variety of answers you can get when you change the context and you change the prompt is enlightening. It's only through really understanding that through the lens of a product manager and product marketeer, I think, that can you start sort of getting to grips with how it can help you in your job over and above, where should I go and eat this weekend or what movie should I go and see? Do you know what I mean?
I love that idea too of I think there's some great ways to learn prompts and we'll talk about our course shortly. But I also think it's a great exercise to be going after the same information and just change the prompt and see how that evolves. And then you really start to see, again, how important it is and how much you bring to the table by asking the right questions.
Absolutely. And I failed to mention this earlier on because I was even thinking, because we're great product managers in Pragmatic as well. I've been doing a lot of discovery interviews for this course as well. And one of the things I found generative AI helpful in doing is structuring my questions, because I'd ask the imaginary AI generator product manager a question that I thought I might ask in a discovery interview. I saw the answer. I said, now I've seen that answer, I actually think I want to change my question. Talk about a fantastic environment where you can experiment with. Now I've seen what the answer is. I'd actually ask that question a little bit different way. So there in and of itself is a fantastic way to get you to have higher efficacy as an interviewer, as a discoverer in the discovery process. Again, in a very safe sort of sandbox environment.
Right? See how it would translate the question and give you an answer, and you realize that's not what I was digging into. That's
right.
Powerful stuff. Because I mean, getting the phone calls and the market research is such an important part. And we work so hard to kind of make that time available to have those.
Yeah.
The more we can optimize those calls, I mean, that's just power after power.
It's precious, hallowed time, right? We managed to secure half an hour with a fantastic candidate, part of our quiet 80% for our discovery calls. And we don't get the questions right. You don't get that 30 minutes back. So
no, you leave. And you
measure, as they say, measure twice, cut once. ChatGPT is a great way to help you measure twice, right?
Yeah, no, excellent point. All right, we've talked a little bit about it here and there, but let's talk about it. We've got a new course, AI Training for Product Professionals, that you've been working with, as you mentioned, a partner who's been in the AI space and using generative AI in his products and in his work. Talk to me a little bit about the course. What problem is it solving and what are they going to learn?
Yeah, so Irina, really, the problem that this course solves, the problem we're talking about. How do product managers and product marketeers get an understanding of, one, how does AI work? What does it do? How does it do the magic that it does and all that sort of thing? All the different types of generative AI tools out there. We do focus specifically on text generative AI, large language models, but as you know, there's lots of other applications of AI out there as well. And then we get into the prompt engineering. How do we think about prompts, all the different ways? And we've got a 101, 201, 301 structure to that. And then we have a hands-on workshop where we work through a series of steps that concludes, a great storyline that resonates specifically with product management and product marketeers. And then finally, we close off the course, because this is something we heard when we did our discovery interviews, is how do we position this with management, right? Right now, the management team is very, very skeptical of this. In fact, when we did a poll, most people sort of have this as more of a bootstrap or grassroots effort right now, rather than mandated from management. So how do we talk about the use of generative AI with our management team and position it with our management team as well? So that's kind of what rounds out. It's a 6 hour.
It's a great piece, because even there's they don't understand, or they use it just, they're like, we should do generative AI, but they don't know what that means. And so there's still, again, a need to inform and explain.
Yeah.
Again, it's not the magic bullet. So either way that your management and leadership team falls on, there's an important conversation to be had to really fully leverage the power.
Absolutely. And in that as well, we don't miss out. Here are the cautions. Here's the things you've got to watch out for. Hallucinations, being one of them that we talked about, which is, again, is interesting. That was such a human word to use with a machine, that it hallucinates. It sort of brings to mind 2001 Space Odyssey or something like that. But yes, so that's it. It's a 6 hour course. Our first run, which I believe is sold out, is actually at the end of August. And then we've got runs every couple of weeks after that. And all the information's on the Pragmatic website. And we're positioning it as a workshop rather than a course here, because it's very much roll your hands up. I mean, that's what people want to do, is roll the sleeves up and get involved in it. So that's the structure of it.
Yeah, no, and I love that you're going to get to practice. And I love the focus on prompts and the different types. I think that, again, not only are you going to learn about, but you're going to leave immediately being able to leverage the tool better. And you're going to get to work with some peers who are also kind of going through this and learn where they've used it and what they've not. And I think that's always a valuable part of the experience as well.
Yeah, I've got to say, and that's what will be collaborative with Niels Johnson, who's the CEO of a company called Deliver, because he's really the guru in this. I'll be honest, I've been playing around with this since, January or February, whenever it came out. And I thought I knew prompt engineering, right? And I'd seen a couple of, free things on YouTube and whatnot. But when I worked with Niels, I didn't know prompt engineering. Like I knew the basics, right? I mean, he's forgotten more than most of us know about prompt engineering. So it was fantastic to see that and really get that next level and say, we go right into, here's the basics, but here's the really sophisticated stuff, and sort of guide people through that journey.
But I think it's such a great partnership, because he does have really deep firsthand knowledge of prompt engineering, and which you and our product team bring to the table is a really deep understanding of product management, product marketing. So we're going to teach you how to do the tool, but also specifically for your role and why it matters to you.
Yes, absolutely. And I think, as always, we say that's the difference about Pragmatic, is the instructors, we're not actors. we've all got more years than we care to remember under our belts, and perhaps a couple of gray hairs around the temples as well.
And, people who go get to see you there. So, I mean,
Yeah.
it's a good thing all around. And if you were to say, and this course is for who?
I think it's for anyone who's heard a lot about AI, has maybe skirted around the edges of it, but still a little bit anxious, or just wants to learn more about it and see specifically how it can be applied, the job of product management or product marketing, then this is the course for them.
Yeah. And I would say even for those of us who've played around quite a bit, there's still a ton there, right?
Yeah, I was one of those people, Rebecca.
Yeah, like you said, yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we talked about lots of different things today. If you were going to have our listeners do 2 things differently tomorrow based on what we talked about today, what would that be?
I think the first thing is you need to think about, if you're unfamiliar with generative AI, is you need to become familiar with this technology. Whether it's through a course or through some other means, you need to become familiar with this. And as we say in the course, actually, one of the first rules, as a little bit of a teaser we reveal, is AI will not replace people, but people using AI will replace people, unless you're that person, right? That's what I would say today. And I would say the second thing is realize that whatever your experience is today, it's the most rudimentary version of AI you will ever use. And I think it's a skill set and a knowledge that anyone who wants to be successful in their career has to add to their, armory of knowledge and skills, and add onto their bat belt as another bat tool. Maybe I'm aging myself there, but you get the gist, right?
Yes. Awesome. All right. Good advice. Great conversation, Will. Thank you very much for joining us. I really enjoyed having you share your experience and your insights and talking about the new course.
Rebecca, thanks so much. It was an absolute pleasure here. And I always enjoy having these conversations. As you say, we always, I describe myself as a right-hand side of the pragmatic framework sort of person, as I think you are as well. But I really appreciate the time today and great discussion. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. That does it for today's episode. Thank you, everyone, for listening. And don't forget to join us next week when we tackle another great topic designed to help you elevate your product, your company, and your career.